Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
When Republicans feel like there's one system of justice for them and a different for Democrats, there's one standard for Hillary Clinton and a different for Donald Trump, it doesn't help bring our country together. And
but the
we have an
allegations
MIA
are not the
president.
same for Hillary
But
Clinton.
we,
Without
you
defending,
know what, because she never was investigated. She never was investigated. She had a bleach bit server. She had a bleach bit. She destroyed phones.
But she was investigated, and we very famously had, the FBI director at the time talking about that. But isn't that because of the level of the allegations is different?
She had 22 top secret documents. Trump had 17. That in and of
emails
itself,
that were classified at the time that weren't later on. He was holding on to U.S. nuclear secrets, information about U.S. allies and their
I haven't seen the process play out, and he hasn't had a chance to defend himself. But we know this. We know that she didn't get indicted. We know her home wasn't raided. We know his was.
Because she cooperated.
In Joe Biden, who isn't addressing the American people in a time of crisis, a deeply divided country. I think a former president being indicted is a time of crisis. And to not hear from our president, to have Joe Biden hiding again and not bringing people together is very disconcerting.
Okay. So that's a lot of lip gloss, honey. That's all I got to say about Ronna McDaniel, who now wants a loyalty pledge that says that no candidate will get into the Republican national debate unless they agree to pledge fealty, even if the Republican nominee is a convicted felon. Can't make this crap up. You just can't. You really can't. So does everybody remember that Hillary Clinton was the most investigated woman in the history of the United States of America's public service ever? Oh my God. Wow. She was never investigated, everybody. She was, yes, she was. She was investigated for like a freaking year. She was investigated, and then they closed the investigation, and then they reopened it 11 days before, famously. It cost her the election. No, I don't remember any of that. I don't. I think there is a two-tier justice system in this country. Really? Well, perhaps you should, focus your eyes on the very top, tippy-top tier, because that's where Donald Trump is. It's just amazing how shameless they are, how they just say this crap. I mean, it's unreal.
Hillary Clinton was investigated for a year. And then they decided that it did not merit any charges. Despite all of that, right, they still don't believe that. I mean, the guy right there saying to DeVrom, Jason, that she wasn't even investigated when, in fact, she was.
Right. And it was interesting because at the indictment, usually at a Trump rally, the phrase you'll hear the most is like, let's go, Brandon, or make America great again. The thing we heard the most here was what about? It was what about Joe Biden? What about Hillary? And I thought that was kind of interesting. We even heard what about JFK Sr. because one of the QAnon believers thinks he's alive and president. I'm not going to go down that road because my brain will explode right now. But it was interesting because that's the same argument that Donald Trump gives on his social media. And after talking to a lot of these people, it kind of became clear that they weren't getting their news from, they didn't read the indictment. They weren't reading articles on it. I think a lot of them were actually getting their news on the Trump indictment from Donald Trump's social media feed on Truth Social. So it's really hard for them to change their opinion on any of this stuff when their news source on the indictment is from Donald Trump.
Right. And the entire country is going to have this dilemma, if it doesn't already, on everything historical, not hysterical, historical. When you don't know, when you actually are allowed to forget, not just recent history, but something a little further, down that road, like from the 60s or from the 70s or redlining all through the 80s, or the welfare queen terminology that the Republicans use to inflict racist memes of the day into the conversation about who gets, checks, who gets food assistance, who gets housing assistance. They always, it's the welfare queen. It's the and we learned, through statistics years and years ago that was a lie too, that most of the people that get food assistance, most of the people that were getting cash welfare, and to this day, people who get cash welfare are white people. White, lily white, pinkish white, beige white people who need a little help. I mean, it is unbelievable how when you don't read, when you don't know, when you get your information from, tainted sources, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. You're not going to be able to figure out what the right move is. You're not going to be able to figure out any crime. And you're not going to be able to figure out that when there's crime like this and the government is doing the crime, you eventually will have to pay for that crime. You know why? Because it's not a private company where the shareholders pay for the crime. It's government where you're the freaking shareholder. You get it? And that's why it's in your best interest to know what's gone on, to understand what is really wrong and what isn't, and what needs to be adjudicated and what doesn't, what needs to be litigated and what doesn't. And honestly, what do you think is going to happen as a taxpayer, whatever, if, Donald Trump go ahead and says, oh, here's another $2 trillion transfer in wealth from the working guy to the very rich again? Who pays for that? Who pays for that kind of crime? You do. Tony in California.
Hi, Randy.
Hey.
Want to tell you that I'm very much for reparations, and my wife wanted me to make it clear that I'm not trying to be an a-hole on this. But earlier you said that making these payments are kind of targeting the people who, or trying to prevent people from doing this in the future. Would be a reason to do this. But however, the people paying for this is going to be taxpayers, so you're going to get some sort of political pushback on it. And it really doesn't deter the corporations and people who are responsible for the redlining and all the bad stuff that's been done for the last 150 years.
So who is responsible for these policies?
Who's responsible? I would say corporations.
No, it's our government. Well, it's our government. Our government is responsible for these gerrymanders. Our government is responsible for allowing redlining. Our government is responsible for segregation. Our government is allowing health disparities, et cetera, et cetera. And so when the government isn't held accountable by you, then the government's going to be held accountable by fines. Okay. And that's just the way it works. Because
I get that.
Right?
I get that.
Because we're the shareholders in this corporation. We are.
We are, but then the board members just leave and new board members come along and they keep doing the same stuff.
Right, because people keep voting for the same kind of crap. Listen, that's the sad thing. Taxpayers always pay for crime. Always. Who do you think pays for crime? Who pays for policing? Who pays, when a police officer, is fined? Do you think he comes out of pocket and pays the $2 million, $5 million to the family? No, it comes out of the taxpayers. So pay attention, everybody, if you really, really don't want to pay for the crimes that the government is doing, right? If you don't, I don't. Vote that way. Don't have time to listen to the live show? Want to hear more on your schedule? Go to randyrhodes.com and buy a stinking podcast.